There are two things that kids cannot tolerate. Kids cannot tolerate not knowing the rules, and kids cannot tolerate not belonging. So let me say it just the opposite. There's two things kids have to have. They have to know what the rules are, and they have to belong to their parents of origin. And why I say parents of origin is because if you are adopted or if someone's adopted, what's most important is that adopted kid belonging to his biological parents. Now, this is one of the reasons why kids want to know the rules and why kids thrive when the rules don't shift and change. One of the worst, maybe not the worst thing you could do to a kid, but one of the things you could do to your kids to help create a dysfunctional brain for them is to constantly be changing the rules of the house, right? So anyone who grew up in a dysfunctional household or a parent who was dangerous or an alcoholic or something like that, the rules changed by the minute. And that is very, very dangerous to that kid's brain. So the two things all kids want on this planet is they want to know the rules and they want those rules to stay the same because then they can work really well within those boundaries. They thrive. So even if you were a strict parent, but your rules were the same for everyone, that kid can still thrive. The other thing is kids want to belong. And we won't get into this that much because this kind of gets into the woo-woo part of what I believe to be true on this planet. But if you were born from parents who struggled financially, then there is a part of your brain that is going to want to belong to those parents. And one of the ways you will do that is you will struggle financially. So it's very interesting because when we grow up, we still don't get away from being a kid, but we grow up and then we realize that we need to grow and protect our money. So we probably move our money into the stock market and we want to learn about the stock market and what the rules are. So I want to just share with you one rule today about the stock market, just one rule today, and ask yourself, do you believe in that or do you not believe in that, or how is that reacting or triggering or not triggering you? Hopefully to spark a conversation even on the Facebook group. Hey everybody, this is RC Peck, and this is my weekend podcast. I think this is my first podcast, maybe the second podcast with my new MacBook Pro. So I'm still working on getting everything set up on it, but it's so great to have you here. And the theme, hold on, I hit something I wasn't supposed to hit. The theme is really one thing, the one rule, not that there's just one rule, but the main rule. And I'll start from a different point of view, and that is Mother Nature is never wrong. Mother Nature is never broken. Mother Nature is nature. Nature is nature. Even when there are huge forest fires, is it wrong? Is it broken? No. Now you may say, well, those forest fires are millions of acres now, not hundreds of thousands. Well, that's a man-made thing, but nature is never wrong. Nature is never broken. And most people would be like, yeah, nature being broken? And guys, I'm not getting into climate change. All right, I'm just simply talking about, is nature ever broken or ever wrong? And for me, the answer is no. Nature is always right, and nature is just doing what nature does. Okay. So let's switch out nature and add in the market, whether that's the stock market, the bond market, the currency market, or the physical asset market, which physical assets are real estate and commodities. I'm not going to show real estate today, but I'm going to show commodities. So the stock market, the bond market, the currency market, and the commodity market. I don't believe they're ever wrong. I don't believe they're ever broken. But if you've ever caught yourself saying or thinking, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense is your point of view of the market, because the market always makes sense. And I found if people start with that frame, that the market always makes sense, then it's going to help you grow and protect your money more effectively. Just like Mother Nature always makes sense. It may be painful to some people, but it always makes sense. So the stock market always makes sense. The bond market always makes sense. The currency market always makes sense. The commodity market always makes sense. And so what I want to do given that the inauguration was yesterday for the 45th president of the United States, is I want to look at the four main assets on this planet. And there are only four assets on this planet that you can invest in. You cannot invest in 5 or 6 or 7 or 12 or 27. There are only four places to put your money on this planet, and you are always invested in at least one of those. Always. You go to work, you get paid, that payment gets put into your savings account. You are fully invested in one of those assets, which is currencies. So let's look at these. All these are going to be 20-year price charts, given that this is the beginning of a new year. Look at this. This is the S&P 500. I show the S&P 500 because it is the most followed, most liquid index on planet Earth. And when you look at the screen, I help your brain see the pattern. And the S&P 500 has been in an uptrend for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It has been in an uptrend. I don't know whether it should or should not be in an uptrend. But if you go with the point, and if you believe that the market is always right? This doesn't make sense. This can't possibly make sense. The market always makes sense. So let's just go big picture here. Here is the S&P 500. It's been in this it's been in this stable uptrend for 8 years. Now, while it's been in that, there's been some correction and some volatility. But so far, the market's been in an uptrend. And until that changes, nothing changes. So it always makes sense. The stock market always makes sense. It's our point of view that doesn't always make sense. And so you want to ask yourself better questions so your money can be aligned with the market more often. So that is the stock market. The next one I want to show you is the bond market. This is a price chart of the 30-year bond. And the reason why I put the word price before bond is because oftentimes people confuse or collapse or condense whether they're looking at a price of a bond or the yield of a bond. And so this is a price chart of the 30-year bond. And look, I think your brain can look at this 2-decade-long price chart and go, oh, stable uptrend. Yeah, there's movement in that stable uptrend, but hey, it's still in a stable uptrend. Until it breaks that stable uptrend, bonds are in a, well, we don't have all the data. I don't have all the data on this price chart, but the bond market is in a 35-year bull market. Could it have ended back in July of last year? Of course it could have, but we won't know that really until this starts trending lower, and the 10-year treasury looks slightly different because it's been going sideways for 5 years, but this is the 30-year bond. And until this trend changes, nothing changes with bonds. This is the trend, and it's in a stable uptrend. And so nothing changes until it does. So when you hear people talk about how bonds are crashing and people are going to lose their money, and look, I sometimes get drawn into like, man, did we just see the top? And I'm going to do better this year to even, get back to the big picture and go, look, if it is crashing, then it's going to have to break out of this, in this case, this 2-decade stable uptrend, but it's not. So the big picture is bonds are moving higher. And just like nature's never broken. The bond market is never broken. And so we look at this and go, oh, okay, well, right now the price of 30-year bond is moving down, but it's still in that stable uptrend. All right, well, until things change, nothing changes. The third, in no particular order, guys, the third major asset class on this planet is currencies. And I show the US dollar not because I was born in the United States and I hold a US passport. I actually identify more with similar type people than me than people who hold the same type of passport that I do. In fact, because I've traveled a lot in my life, I've always identified where I live. So when I traveled when I was younger and people asked where I lived, I'd say I'm from Chicago. And when I travel overseas and people ask me where I live, I either say San Francisco or I say California. Or I say Silicon Valley. Actually, probably in the last 5 or 10 years, I've been saying Silicon Valley. But I never say America because I identify more with the Bay Area or San Francisco or Silicon Valley or California than I do that 6 million square miles called the United States. And I'm not bashing the United States. I'm just telling you how I identify. So here is the US dollar. It is the largest traded currency on the planet. And just go ahead and look at this for a second. This is 2 decades of real information, not fake news, not what you want it to be, but this is actually what it is. This is what's actually happening, and the US dollar is never broken, just like nature is never broken. And I put in a stable uptrend just for you to see what this looks like. Now, we could break down, we could stay in the stable uptrend, but this is a 20-year chart, and you can see that the US dollar was in a sideways channel during this stable uptrend, but it broke out of it and say, oops. And so I'm watching this to see, does it come back into it? Does it come back to this bottom trend line? Does it break down into this sideways channel? We don't know yet. We don't get to decide, but we can actually watch the price. And this is one thing that I just pound the table, beat the drums with people is everyone's talking about fake news. Just go look at price charts, guys. Look at the price charts. There are hundreds of millions of people with trillions of dollars invested in here. This will overwhelm fake news coming out of Moscow or wherever fake news is coming out of. This is hundreds of millions of people, if not billions, trading trillions of dollars. This is what this price chart is showing. What it's showing you here right now, what it is showing us right now is people want the US dollar. People want the US dollar. Whether that's right or not right, right never matters. What matters is what's actually happening. And the US dollar has broken out of that sideways channel and is moving higher. And we need to see if it corrects down here and sits right on top of this $100 or 100-point number, or if it moves back into the channel. But that's what's actually happening right now. And the dollar broke to the upside, not out of the channel, but it was breaking to the upside before November 8th, when the world found out that Trump's going to be the 45th president of the United States. But then it did break out to the upside of that channel. And that's important. Doesn't have to make sense because the market always makes sense. And then the last of the 4 assets is commodities. Well, it's actually physical assets, and I set aside real estate on this, but I'm showing you commodities. And commodities is more of a global thing because gold is gold in whatever country you go to. Oil, for the most part, I know there's 64 different types of oil that are traded around the world, but for the most part, there's Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate crude, 2 types of oil. But oil it trades pretty closely, whether it's Brent or West Texas Intermediate crude. So we're looking at commodities. Copper is copper around the world. Gold is gold. Silver is silver. Wheat is wheat. And so what you see on the screen is 2 decades of information. And you saw commodities break below this 2-decade-long support. It broke below it and then popped above it. And you can see that in the lower left corner that commodities broke below and now it's above that support. So this doesn't have those beautiful trends like, say, the US dollar has, or the US bond price has, or the S&P 500. But this is showing us something, right? This is showing us that it broke down below a major support and then came back above it over the last 12 months. And so if you want commodities to go higher, you're going to want to see this break higher, this price break higher. And even with the US dollar breaking to the upside, you have not seen commodities break down again. So we're looking at an asset class here that has basically, in a very volatile way, gone sideways. And so the question is the world heading into an inflationary period, right? Because we've been in a disinflationary period or a deflationary period, which they're kind of the same. I mean, deflation, I guess, specifically is when it's below 0, and disinflation is when the rate is falling. But inflation's been falling over time, especially since the global financial crisis. So if in fact we are going to get reinflation, or we're going to start having inflation in this world again, it ain't going to happen until this commodity price chart moves higher. And so this is something that you can watch, and you don't need to get caught up in whatever type of news or information that is getting fed to you. You can just go look at a price chart of the CRB. Yeah, and you can say, oh, well, if we're going to have inflation, then this price chart needs to move higher. Okay, so what is the takeaway? Look, the takeaway is markets are always right. Mother nature is always right. What may not be right is our point of view. And if you ever catch yourself saying, this doesn't make sense, wait, this doesn't make sense. What doesn't make sense is your point of view of what's happening. Because nature always makes sense. The markets always make sense. And it's our job to make sense of it. Well, look, we don't actually have to make sense of it. We just want to align our money with what is happening, right? So the market is always right. The markets are always right. The markets know everything, right? Harry Dent says the S&P 500 is going to 0, or the Dow Jones is going to 3,000, or gold is going to $500. Porter Stansberry says the dollar is going to get crushed. The end of America is going to happen. The market's going to whatever. Guys, just look at the price charts. Just look at the price charts. They know everything. Hundreds of millions of people are voting with trillions of dollars to create that price chart. And then lastly, the markets always make sense. They always make sense. It's our point of view that doesn't always make sense. And when you start from that frame, and go back to how we started this conversation, what's the first rule, right? Kids, there's only two things kids cannot tolerate: not knowing the rules and not belonging. What's the first rule of the markets or investing is the markets are always right. And I find that brings an incredible amount of clarity to people and helps them protect and grow their net worth and their wealth and their investments. Hey guys, this is just another step in helping you protect your portfolio and your future. Until next time, this is RC Peck. Hey guys, it's so great to have you. We are starting 2017 with lots of excitement going on in or on the political order and the world order. Stick with me because the price charts always make sense. Join the Facebook group if you haven't, because the interaction is much more in there and I bring in much more content. And I'm super excited about a new training that I'm coming out with. And it's the result of hiring an outside consulting company and saying, RC, let's look at your last 2 decades. And what are those 5 shifts that people have made or have had to make to really align their money? And I really had to think about this. Now, they didn't say it had to be 5. You know, is it 3? Is it 7? Is it 10? But what are the shifts that people make to get their net worth growing, to have reliability, to get control back over or get the power back over their finances, their investing, their net worth, their wealth, their investing? What are those shifts? And so through a lot of grueling work, I figured out, with the help of an outside consulting company, what are those 5 shifts that have helped people grow in a reliable and a consistent way their money over the last 2 decades. And so that training will be coming out soon. So I'm super duper looking forward to that, and I'll let you know when it comes out. Thanks so much, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.